Hey, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today I've asked Jack to come on the show and break down this headline he's covered in Forbes. Goldman Sachs is having another round of layoffs. It's going to be about 3% to 4% of the bank's full headcount, which ends up being around 1,300 to 1,800 jobs. And the kicker here, which is why I want Jack to break it down for us, is it's connected to the annual review process. And the bank, the executives have come out saying, hey, these folks that are getting cut, we're doing it because of performance reasons. It's not a typical reorg layoff. It is performance focused. Now, did I get that right, Jack?
Yeah, so this is what I think is so unfair. It's not just Goldman. Today, we're talking about Goldman Sachs, really well regarded, one of the top tier investment banks there is. And what happens on Wall Street, it's kind of cold-blooded. Every year, sometimes a couple of times a year, cull the herd. So what happens, they'll take supposedly the low performers, the people who feel are not up to snuff and just let them go. And it's harsh, it's cold, it's brutal. And not only that, it's not just the layoff. The challenge is this. So let's say Rick and I are Goldman Sachs and we're let go. The press is showing that they're letting go low performers, non-performers, words to that effect. So if we're going to now go and interview at Morgan Stanley or interview at Deutsche Bank or a hedge fund or a private equity shop, the companies aren't stupid. They're going to say, why did Jack and Rick get chosen to leave the company?
Wow.
While there's 40,000 people at the company already, why did they leave? Why were they asked to leave? Is there a problem? Is there an issue? So not only do you lose your job, but now you have this stigma attached. Hey, you're a non-performer. You're a low performer. You're not up to snuff. There's something wrong. You didn't do something right. So now that follows you. So imagine going to an interview and the interviewer at a Morgan Stanley, they're going to, human nature. They're going to be curious. Are we taking a leftover from somebody? Is this a bad person? Is this someone who did something really bad? Did they do insider trading? Did they do something questionable? And now that sticks with you. So Rick, I don't think it's like that in the tech sector, but it's a really cold way, in my opinion, really cold way of doing it. Now, if they didn't put on the imprimatur of low performer and words to that effect, okay. But once you say that, it plants that seed for other people to look at you in that way. It just seems like a double tap of negativity. Losing a job, having this like prejudice against you because maybe it was your fault, something happened.
So it's like, not only do I not want you, I'm going to screw you so that
Right.
you can't get a job anywhere else. It's the scarlet letter that's going to
Yes.
stick on your resume.
Oh my, that's a great way to say it. It's a scarlet letter. Like, hey, beware of this person with the scarlet letter on it. There's a problem. Watch out for this person. And then, you know what? Think about this. This is what's also so crazy. This is what drives me nuts. If you have 1,000 people getting laid off, they make it
Right.
sound like it's nothing. Oh, it's only 1,300 people. Only 1,300 people. Where the hell are the managers? If there's 1,000 people that are not performing up to a certain level, whose fault is that? Wouldn't you have to point to the managers and say, wait a minute, are you doing your job? Are you training them? Are you coaching them? Are you mentoring them? Are you reskilling them? Are you doing everything you can to bring them up? Maybe it's not the workers' fault. And this is another reason why it's so frustrating for people, because it could be the managers who suck. Like, why do we absolve them of everything? If they were good managers, presumably, they would see that their people aren't really doing well. So they'll do everything in their power to bring them up so they don't have to be called, right? I mean, we ignore that part.
I wonder, and so this is my days when I wanted to be a lawyer, young Rick time.
Yeah.
But a lot of these big law firms, they have these so-called up or out policies.
Mhm.
where, after 5, 7 years, if you're not a partner at the law firm, you're let go. Is that the case at some of these Wall Street banks, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, what have you? Do they have a similar practice in terms of, hey, if you've been at the firm for this couple of years and you're not on that partner track or you're not an executive yet, is that how they're kicking these butts of the managers? Is it in another roundabout way? Or does that culture not exist? Or does it exist in a different way on Wall Street?
That's a really good question. What happens is this with Wall Street, it's similar to the way you're describing, but a little different. Let's say you're an investment banker, you're doing deals, you're doing mergers and acquisitions, you're doing underwriting for IPOs, what have you, and you're the hot shot, you're doing great. But then all of a sudden, some years go by, maybe you lose some clients, the economy is different, maybe not so great. So
Right.
now, let's say Rick and I were like hotshot young investment bankers, but due to the economy, due to other events, due to our age, maybe things are changing. And now it's kind of what you're saying about the law firm. They may tap us on the shoulder and say, hey guys, you had a great run, but we're looking at the numbers and we're paying you, $1 million a year and you're not really generating that much. So, sorry.
Bye.
So it's a little similar. Like it's your expiration date. All right. You were really good. You really helped us. You made a lot of money, but you're not making us money anymore. So see ya. Take care.
It just strikes me of this culture of what have you done for me lately? Right? There's
Yes.
this recency bias in terms of like, hey, are you producing right now here in this last year or whatever that cycle might look like? It strikes me because in tech, I find that there's not this same culture. You could be a senior software engineer, and that could be your terminal level, and no one would bat an eyelash. Like, hey, Rick, why aren't you a staff software engineer? Why aren't you a director? Why aren't you a CTO? If you're just killing it at coding, shipping all the time, that's fine. Or, if you are laid off by Google, I'm sure Microsoft would love to have you, right? I'm sure Apple would love to have you. There's hundreds, thousands of startups that would dream picking you up, right? So they could say, hey, we have a former Google engineer now at our startup. Again, this is why I wanted to chat with you about it. It just strikes me as so, right? What happens to these thousands of people? And I imagine these banks, Goldman, everyone else, does this every single year. Do you just have to leave the industry entirely? Does it sink you that bad? Do you have to go down a tier? Because it just seems so especially brutal when Goldman does it. So many people want to work at Goldman. What if you finally make it and you're just part of this herd that gets called this year? Are you just screwed all out of the whole finance industry because Goldman has put this brand on you?
The positive side to working in finance is that unlike FANG, where you may have half a dozen or plus top tech companies everyone wants to work for,
Right.
finance, is really large. I think a lot of people don't realize how big that industry is. You have everything from wealth management to money management to hedge funds to private equity to trading. You have fintech. So there's so many different ways you can move your career.
Got
So
it.
let's say you have that scarlet letter, you can move to different areas. You may have the background and experience to pivot into mergers and acquisitions. You can maybe pivot into private equity. Hey, all right, it didn't work at Goldman because you were doing this, but you really do have the knowledge, the background, the credentials. You could go somewhere else. So you can tell me if I'm wrong. It just seems to me there's so many more outlets for people to go within the financial sectors. Because even with finance, you have insurance, you have so many different practices that you can move into that you can make a nice living and do well. Where I think with tech, you really, and again, tell me if I'm wrong about this, all the attention really is for FANG. That's like the mecca. And if you're not there, you're nowhere. It is similar to Wall Street where you want to be in the top echelon, whether JP Morgan, Bank of America, KKR, which is big private equity and so forth. But even if you can't do that, there's so many other, mid-tier, what have you. Now, you might take an ego hit. So if you go from Goldman and you go to maybe a second-tier investment bank, you might say, but at least you have a job. You're still in the game.
Right.
Where I think within tech, it's hard because you're fighting over just a limited 5, 6 companies, at least what I see on Blind all the time. So you're fighting everybody else, brushing up on their leak code and doing whatever you can to make
Right.
sure that you get into there. Where with finance and Wall Street, I think it's more open. And it's also across the whole US and international. So, like, you could actually work in different countries, in different cities, in different states. So, I think you have more mobility. It sounded harsh when we started talking about what do you do next if, let's say, you're laid off from a Goldman or another bank. There are lots of other opportunities for good, smart people.
Wow. I appreciate sharing that other part of the coin because in tech, my understanding, having been in this industry for so long, is everyone wants to go to these 5, 6 companies because those simply are the companies that pay the best. Tech, it seems analogous to finance in the sense that there are many different specialties, different industries, certainly many different company sizes that you can work at. But God, like the pay difference from this top tier to the second tier, or God forbid, tiers below is just so significant that you really feel it on the way down. You really feel it on the way out, where you might have to change your entire lifestyle. Maybe that's not the case, is what I'm getting from what you're saying, Jack, in finance, where maybe there's just more off ramps and that off ramp is less steep. It doesn't kick you in the butt on the way out
Yeah.
as much as it might do in tech.
Well, let me ask you with tech, if you're in FANG, it sounds like there's like a big drop off if you go down tiers. Like how much money, let's say, for typical, let's say someone working for Amazon or Apple, I see what people are saying on Blind that they're making 500, 600, 700, 800,000. Is that accurate, or are they hyping it, or what's the real deal that goes on?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because part of it is a bit of a hype, right? Where you're pumping it up. And
Mhm.
that's largely because if you look at the stock market, most of the gains in the biggest 500 companies, the S&P 500, it's pretty much these 7 companies, right? The so-called
Mm.
Magnificent Seven. And they're primarily tech companies. There's the Amazons, the Nvidias, the Metas. So that's why those end up being the 7 or 10 companies that everyone in tech wants to work at, because stock-based compensation is such a big part of compensation packages when you're looking at your TC, your total compensation. A lot of folks, their initial grant in their offer letter might be something to the effect of base salary is going to be K, and you are going to get a stock package worth 500K split up over 4 years. So your first year, technically on paper, your compensation is actually 200 plus the 125, 325,000. But what ends up happening is as your stock gets released to you, as it vests over time, the stock value, the share price actually trades up because, they're innovating, they're coming up with all these new, technologies and products and services, where the company is becoming more valuable. So that $125,000 stock grant that you got every year ends up being worth 200, 300, 400. And so your total compensation ends up being 600, 700K every single year, when on paper, it was just supposed to be that 125. And that big drop in terms of that high level to, a startup is especially extreme because it's all about the liquidity, right? If you work at Meta, you get that stock, you can sell it immediately as it vests because you can go to Fidelity, you can go to E-Trade, you can go to, Merrill Lynch, Robinhood, and buy Meta right now today. Everyone knows exactly what the share price is going to be. There's a market where you're going to be able to sell it. But if you work at these startups, even these huge companies about to go public, that liquid market doesn't exist, right? So you have basically lottery tickets where you can't necessarily sell your shares. If you do try to sell your shares, you're not necessarily sure what you can get for them. There's all these marketplaces, and we've had them on the show, but that market is opaque. People might not necessarily want to buy it, or you might have to wait 4, 5, 7, 10 years even for that liquidity event to happen, whether it's a secondary sale of shares or that eventual IPO or an acquisition. So you could be sitting on a lot of paper cash. That recruiter, that offer letter will say at a startup, hey, you're going to get 100,000 shares. And you're like, great, but you can't sell it. Or you have to sell it at a discount. So that's that big drop. It really comes down to that stock-based compensation. I've been on the other side where on paper, my stock compensation was supposed to be 100K and the company actually does poorly. The shares trade down. And so you're actually seeing a pay cut. It's not something that anyone at the company likes, but I've been there too.
So let me just understand this. If you're in the right company and is doing well and your stock appreciates, that 125 and the base will be like almost chump change compared to what you're going to get on the appreciation of your stock, right? So is it almost like you guys are gambling on the tech side where you're gambling that you find that right company, and maybe that's why everyone wants to go to FANG, because they feel like the stock's always going to go up, and if it always goes up and you have a lot of that stock, you're going to be freaking rich. Is that the game? Is that how it works?
A little bit,
Sort
right?
of. Sort
I
of.
mean, it's less of a
Yeah.
game in the sense that Meta,
Right.
Amazon, the volatility is not quite there. It's not a meme stock. The variation isn't going to be that crazy, right? These typical offer letters at these large companies, when they're describing your compensation, most base salaries are going to be the same. If you're going to be a senior professional on the business side or a software engineer, it might be something like 200 to 250, and that band is pretty tight. It's really the stock compensation that's different, right? So there's certain roles like engineering, tech side, they might earn more stock than someone that is, on the HR side or on the marketing side. You'll get something in your offer letter that says, $400,000, but it vests over 4 years. And so you do a little bit of math and you end up saying, oh, that's $100,000 a year.
Mhm.
So they'll give you $100,000 worth of stock, whatever that might be. And it's usually based on a certain date after you join or a certain point of time in the year where they'll take a snapshot of what is our stock trading on that day and then give you that many shares. And you just got to hope, oh, well, I got 50 shares. Oh, lucky for me, our stock actually went up. And so my 100K of stock is now worth 120 or 200 or whatever that might be.
Rick, what I find so interesting and funny is that if you asked any person at random about tech versus finance/Wall Street, they would say, oh, the Wall Streeters are the gamblers. They're the ones taking the risk. But the more I'm hearing you talk about it, it's different. Let's say you're at a Barclays, Deutsche Bank, or good firms, but not that, let's say Goldman or Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or the big
Right.
PE shop, you'll get a really nice base and then you get a large bonus. So most of the money on Wall Street and finance, it's the bonus time. They get little stock for the most part. Maybe some big executives get some stock, but it's really the bonus. So you're working the whole year hoping you'll get your bonus. In fact, a lot of people who work on Wall Street, their salary is just to pay the bills and all that. But then they wait for the end of the year where you get that big bonus. And then you're like, yeah, the gamble is that you could have a bad year, but you're crushing it all along. Like, think about what's going on now in the market. Everything is going up, 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 up. All of a sudden, Nvidia is going down. The stocks are going down. So you could have this great year, and then all of a sudden, not so great. And now your bonus could be what they call a donut, or zero, or a bagel.
Wow.
Meaning, like, literally, you could have been crushing it almost all year. And then in like November, early December, things go bad and like, oh, sorry, Jack, sorry, Rick, you got a bagel. You got like a zero on your bonus or a very little bonus. So that's gambling. You're hoping you're going to hold your job and then get a good bonus. On your side with tech, you got to hope that the company you're with, your equity is good and nothing goes wrong with your company, because then you can say, oh my God, all right, my base is all right. But now whatever is going wrong with my company, RSU.
Restricted stock unit, RSU.
So you have RSUs, but like if your company all of a sudden something goes wrong, then you're skunked too, right? You did all that hard work and maybe you don't have much to show for it. So I guess both sides, you're gambling. on what you right, like how it's going to play out.
Well, the PR
Yeah,
person in
yeah,
me was saying, no, it's not a gamble
mm,
because it's to align incentives. We're in the same company together. We all want the company to do well. We're getting shares of the company because we're literally part owners
mm,
of the company. And so that's to reward you for the hard work. It's almost like a profit sharing where it seems like on Wall Street, you're getting hold card cash, right?
mhm.
For your bonus. In tech, that cash bonus is less frequent. Some companies do have it in addition to the stock and your base salary, but it's primarily stock, right? So there's almost two kind of gambles. If you're working at a startup, you're getting stock options instead
Mm,
of restricted stock units. For the most part, the stock option, you actually have to buy them with your own money at a certain strike price at a certain price. And you're hoping that one, the price that I'm allowed to buy those shares at is low enough or lower than what the eventual value might be if IPO or whatever. Then second, that the company eventually hits that milestone where someone wants to buy the stock or the stock becomes liquid. Because, I've been at companies where I buy my stock from my stock options and I'm just sitting on the stock. I don't really have a good way to sell it.
mm,
The value might even go down because, in 2020, 2021, a lot of tech was flying high. These companies were raising at these crazy valuations. And so on paper, the stock went up, but now we're in 2024. That might not be the case. There's no liquid market. So you're kind of making this guess. But what if I had joined in 2021, got these stock options that were priced really, really high, and now I have to wait and hope that the company will eventually get to those same levels or grow into that valuation for my stock options to be worth or something. Alternatively, you work at, a not so cool public company, the stock goes down. And so I was promised K a year, but now it's, the stock gets halved and now I actually have 50K in stock. It's like, great, I got a pay cut.
Oh, this opens up a door. Let me just kind of think this through out loud because I'm blind on the blind platform. And, I would encourage anybody who is going to watch this to check it out because it's interesting to learn what goes on behind the scenes in different industries and different sectors. So what I see is this within the finance area. Here's kind of a drawback or maybe a little pitfall is that let's say you're a stockbroker, wealth manager, money manager, what have you. The incentives is that you need to sell more, you have to do certain things. But by doing so, we see on a regular basis, like, oh my God, here's what happened, this terrible thing. Because you get big bonuses based upon your productivity, human nature, you're going to push the envelope. Let's say you're a stockbroker. Insurance rates are going up, mortgage rates are going up, everything, food is going up. You're like, oh, I need some extra money. Maybe I'm going to tell Rick, this stock you bought, let's get you out of this stock and put you in this stock. So now the broker will get some more commission money
Right.
because they're churning your account a little bit because they got to come up. And that's just one little example of it. On the finance Wall Street side, I don't know if the same thing happens in tech because tech is seems to me kind of like you can't fudge the number to goose up your total package.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if there's an analog in tech, right? Obviously, we have
Mm,
tech sales where you
yeah.
could structure a deal in a way that gives that sales rep more commission up front or something like that. But, if you're a marketing professional or a PR guy like me, I get that stock no matter what. The cause and effect in my day-to-day work is less clear, right? Obviously, as an engineer, your work, the code that you're producing ends up being the product that we can sell. Great. The PR gets that publicity and hopefully drives more sales, more qualified leads by marketing. But there's less of an impact in terms of how I can kind of goose up my own numbers because it's at a company
Mm,
level.
yeah.
You have to massively coordinate and obviously that's what the company wants, right? Like everyone wants you all to put in those crazy work hours so that everyone's shares can be valuable. You almost have this collective action problem where you really have to get everyone to not rest and rest to like work really hard hard rather than kind of more immediate. Thanks for breaking down
Uh-huh.
the state of Wall Street for us, Jack, and what these kind of annual performance
Mhm.
related layoffs look like and what it actually means for those people that are affected and how that affects their compensation packages.
It's unfortunate we have to talk about the culling and the low performers, but you know what?
Right.
This is what it is. The value that you and I add is by giving some color and context to what's going on. Sometimes you just have to have this calm, nuanced conversation where you can really delve into, hey, what is going on? So people who are trying to navigate their careers may say, you know what? Listen to Jack and Rick. I think the tech area is really good. Maybe how can I kind of cross over and vice versa? So I think it opens up ideas, particularly when it's a tough white collar market for finding jobs. I think that's the value that we offer in part is to show, hey, here are different things you could take a look at that maybe you didn't even know existed. And if you lost your job and looking for a new one, hey, maybe you could go into finance, go into Wall Street. So we'll keep doing these kind of shows so that we could help people navigate their careers, grow their careers, make more money, and build a future for themselves.
That's it for The Blind Ambition. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.